The very first step is cutting the wood for the body. Then I will plane each piece. It's very important to make sure your table saw blade is square before you cut pieces to glue them together. This is mahogany that I'm using for the body of the guitar. I'm going to use maple for the back of the guitar. Now I'm going to glue the back to the front. Now I'm going to mark some guide holes and then trace the body out. Then very carefully cut it out on the bandsaw. It helps to make relief cuts to help with cutting this out on the bandsaw. Now I'm using double-sided tape to stick the template back onto the body. You have to pay strict attention to the grain direction when you're using one of these large flush trim router bits. I have these templates to help me locate where to carve the shape of the guitar. Now I use a rasp to start shaping the body of the guitar. One very helpful thing is to buy an attachment for your sander. It's a spongy, flexible head that allows you to sand curves. Now I use a very large roundover bit on the rest of the guitar body. I'm using maple for the neck, so I am cutting the stock for the neck and planing it to the proper width. You can use a marking gauge to find the center of a board. This is the rosewood for the fingerboard, and so I'm going to cut this in half. Now I'm going to square up the ends. Then I'm going to use a fretboard template to trace out my fretboard. It's not quite long enough, the wood piece I have, so I'm going to have to glue a small piece onto the end. Next, I'm going to hog out as much material as I can before cutting the control cavity. And now I'm using a flush trim bit to cut the cavity. Now it's time to cut the neck pocket. Use your center lines to line everything up. Measure for the pickup cavity depth. My router bit was too wide for the guitar template, so I had to create my own template to route the channel between the control cavity and the pickup cavity. Next, I'm going to make a template for the pick guard. Making multiple relief cuts helps you to navigate such a small space. I'm using canary wood for the pick guard. This is the finish I used. It's a hard wax finish, very similar to Rubio Monocoat. I'll provide a link on how to apply this. I forgot to route an access cavity for the truss rod, so I went back and I'm doing that now. The next thing I have to do is figure out where the truss rod is going to go. So I use all my center lines, mark out my neck, and then trace where the truss rod will go. Next, I'm going to measure the depth of the truss rod and then cut the truss rod channel. Now I'm back to the wood for the pick guard. I'm going to plane it down to the width that I need. I also planed down the wood that I'm using for the fretboard. Next, I'm tracing the pick guard onto the canary wood and then cutting it out with the bandsaw. Then I use a flush trim bit. Next, I sand the pick guard down and then it's finished. It's now time to cut the neck out, so I'll cut as closely as I can using the bandsaw and then take it over to the flush trim bit on the router table. I said this before, but I will say it again. You have to pay strict attention to your grain direction when you're using a flush trim bit of this size. It will very easily rip the piece out of your hand and ruin it. The next step is carving the neck. I'm using what's called the facet method. There's many good videos about this, but it basically comes down to filing away the corners and then filing away more corners and then filing away more corners in a very measured way until you get a round neck shape. One of the steps in the faceted method, though, is filing down to the correct neck thickness at the 1st fret and then at the 12th fret, and that's what I'm doing here. Here I am filing down to the correct thickness at the 12th fret, and I'm using calipers to determine that measurement. Then I start filing away the corners, or the facets, joining the 1st fret thickness to the 12th fret thickness. Then you can use your less coarse side of your Shinto rasp to smooth things out. Next, I install the electronics into the body. I use a template to trace out the fretboard, and I use another template to trace out the fret locations. I use a marking knife to score the fret locations. This allows the fret saw to have a channel to guide it when you're cutting the frets. Mark out your fret depth with tape, then you can start to cut your frets. After the fret slots are cut, I cut out the fretboard shape on the bandsaw. Next, using double-sided tape, I attach the fretboard to the fretboard template and take it over to the flush trim router bit. I forgot to record cutting out the headstock shape, but I did that, and then I also added some canary wood veneer to the headstock. Next, I glue the fretboard on. Next, I cut the holes for the machine tuners. Tracing an X from fret to fret will give you your center point for your inlay dots. Next, I radius the fretboard. Then, using the fret saw, I do a little bit of cleanup. Using a very small chisel, I chisel out the area for the nut. Then add the side inlay dots. Next, I drill the holes for the neck. And attach the strap buttons. Next comes the fret installation. I bought pre-cut, pre-radiused stainless steel frets. I felt like doing this saved me quite a bit of time. then filing the edges to a 45. And now I'm leveling the frets out. Dressing up the edges with a small file, and then crowning the frets to make them round on top again. Then the last step is polishing the frets. You have to be very careful not to heat them up too much using a Dremel tool. Next, I apply the same hard wax finish to the neck that I did to the body. The next thing I do is to make a nut for the guitar. I wished I had just bought a pre-made nut. I think it would have saved me a lot of time. It's best to cut your nut slot sizes to match the strings that you're putting on your guitar. Now I am installing the nut on the guitar. And then I am installing the tuners. Then the last step is bolting the neck on. I also ended up installing a buffalo nickel string tree. And now for a sound demo.